conduct meetings via teleconference, which is obviously what we're doing this evening. I'm going to begin with a roll call to ensure that we have a quorum. I'll begin with Trustee Scaglione.
Here.
Trustee Gebler.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Rosenblum.
Here.
Trustee Spiro.
Here.
And we have a quorum. So we are underway. Our first order of business is to schedule our upcoming organizational meeting, which is always the first Monday in April, which would make it Monday, April 5th. And I'd like to schedule that for 7 p.m. And at that meeting, we will adopt the rules for the coming year, and we will swear in re-elected members of this board and 2 new members of the board. My congratulations go out to Tom Andrus and Jared Rodriguez on their election to the Board of Trustees. And I would also add thank you for re-electing Denise Scaglione and me to the board as well. We appreciate that, and look forward to working with Catherine Baldwin as well, our newly elected village justice. So Monday, April 5th at 7 p.m., we will meet in the boardroom for that meeting, as we have people that need to be sworn in, and I'm not sure if you can do that over a Zoom or a WebEx, but I know we can do it in person, so that meeting will be there. We will announce in the coming weeks if and when it seems appropriate to move back to Village Hall for all of our board meetings. In the meantime, we will continue this. So stay tuned, please, folks. Our next discussion item for this evening is budget presentations. The department heads will be appearing before the trustees to make their requests and explanations of things that they would like to see included or added to the budget. Mr. Giacchio, do you have a proposed schedule for us?
Yeah, April 6th will be the Recreation Department and Building Department. April 13th will be the Fire Department, Public Works, and the Village Clerk. And April 20th is the Community Liaison, Police Department, and Ambulance Corps.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Anthony, does your department have anything to present as well? Or that's just under the clerk?
That's a great question. Usually I don't ask for anything. So.
I know.
Clerk, treasurer, and administrator. So
yeah, it's usually under the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
If there's anything special, we'll bring it up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that? Okay, we look forward to that. Thank you, Mr. Giacchio. Next up, our Blackboard Connect contract is up.
This is mine too. This is an annual renewal. Blackboard Connect is the company we use to do the email blasts, reverse 911, and the other notices we send out. So it's just a renewal. I think a proposal was sent to the board for consideration.
Any questions about the renewal?
I will say we looked to do it through the website, but the website doesn't do reverse 911, and we feel that's important. So we opted to stay with Blackboard Connect.
Any questions from the trustees? If not, I'll just put it on for approval for next week's regular board meeting. Okay. Mr. Giacchio, the pandemic plan?
So the village board saw the pandemic plan about a month ago, had an opportunity to make comments. We made some changes, slight changes, sent them to the 2 unions as required. Very minor changes, maybe typographical type changes to the original. And that has to get adopted by the village board next week before April 1st. So wanted to make sure it was back on the agenda so you were aware of it come next week when it's a resolution.
Mhm. I think we thought it was fine, complete before. Any additional questions from anyone? If so, please, if not tonight, then please circulate them over the next couple of days, and we'll look to adopt that plan next Tuesday on the 30th. We have our DPW study is underway. I think Trustee Spiro is in a position to give us an update on that, and maybe supplemented by Mr. Giacchio.
Sure. Hello, everyone.
Trustee Spiro.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Anthony and I met this afternoon, and in following up to when they presented, I think it was mid-February, and we're talking about the LaBerge group on the DPW study. So the first component is that they, I think everybody saw the survey that came out to us as stakeholders. And prior to that, Anthony put it together a pretty extensive, some documentation that they were looking for from the department heads. So that would be important if we can all get that in by Friday. And what I'd like to do is just take you very top line on a timeline and some of the key priorities that will fall into some of the factors that overlay with the DPW study. And I'll take a moment to do that. The timing, what we're looking for just as a proposed end date, and that's what we're working towards for when we would expect to have something complete, is by June 30th. It's important to understand that date just in simplifying some of the priorities, and I'll take you through them. And Anthony, you and I can take a pause through them as and take any questions. The first one is decision around staffing. There are currently right now 5 vacancies within DPW. It does live a little independently of the DPW study, but it's important that everybody understand that there are staffing requirements that are vacant. And then also, certainly once the DPW study is finalized, there will be more of what I would call a halo effect of aligning organizational resources and how that not just affects the DPW, but as well as some other departments as well, because everything feeds into that, whether it be Recs and the Rec department. And you'll see the steering committee has everybody from all the different departments on the steering committee for that reason, because it has an effect to everything on what they uncover. The next thing would be to choose an architect for the structure itself because of the funding. The recommendation is to find, and we've had some preliminary discussions, we just haven't put it out for RFP. And the recommendation is to have that finalized for mid-April. And simply because, we don't know what exactly we want from the architect and the design, but if there are certain things that architect would need, they can plug into the study itself to see if we would need to identify additional information. So we want to make sure that whatever we do decide, that it doesn't go too late, because we might be too far along in the process, if that makes sense. Anthony, up in this point, do you want to add anything before I continue on with some of the other priorities?
I'm not sure if it was clear for everybody. It's the architect for the new DPW garage
Yes.
that the village board needs to retain so we can move forward. And a lot of the items in the study will help the architect, in their design. So it would be good to get the architect on board while the study is in progress, or shortly after it's completed. That's
So, that's why we were thinking about 45 days, putting together the requirements and an RFP for that to go out. The next thing is part of the priorities is the capital budget. which is around September, which is September, right? And then, knowing that we're going to be, that's why we don't want it to go too far past, let's say, June, July, because then we're going to run into a snag where we're trying to make recommendations on any kind of capital budget, which we can glean a lot from the study itself. So that's just being thoughtful to that. Talked about, just aligning the organization to task and resources. The other one, which there are two other ones, just to kind of keep on the forefront, recognizing future grants, that we certainly tap into studies such as these as an integral part in getting grants for the future. And Anthony can explain more of some of those grants and what we can, kind of zero in on. But that's something that's very key that we're going to get out of this study.
So so the biggest grant round is the CFAs that come out at the end of July. So it was good to get this study done, if we can get it done by the end of June or substantially done. And just use the example of if they recommend electric vehicles for the DPW fleet, we could apply for a grant for electric vehicles because we have a study that tells us that would be an important function, sustainability, et cetera. So there's many examples of that. We didn't really even talk about the shared services with other communities. That might be other opportunities to apply for grants using the study as a basis for justifying the grant application. So it's important that we get this study done before the grant round expires.
That's something that has to be tied in with the architect as well. I mean, if we're going to go for electric vehicles and stuff, we'd want to make sure that we have charging stations, equipped within the structure, correct?
Yes,
Yep.
Absolutely. And again, that's why everything's kind of hinged on, putting out this proposed date of June 30th to finish it.
Right.
It is fluid depending, because it's really dependent on us doing the survey work. And then really, when you look through the proposal, you'll see a lot of it is interviewing the departments, collecting the data, bringing it together, getting in front of the board. But they are, on task, understanding what are the priorities that's feeding into that date and why. And then the last is just recognizing and paying attention to EDGE because of the services there and what they're going to be needing and how we have to roll that out with the DPW study and moving everything forward. So that's another consideration as well. So I'll take a pause if anybody has any questions in regards to the study and now laying over the timing or anything that you think that you'd like for us to bring up when we are talking to the consultant over the next 2 weeks. Because shortly thereafter, we're getting the steering committee put together.
And you want the questionnaire completed by the end of the week, right?
If it's possible by Friday, yes, that would be helpful. Because really by the middle of next week, they're going to be reaching out to talk to everybody and because we really have to get the actual kickoff meeting secure with the steering committee. So that we're looking to do that mid next week.
Okay.
Anything else?
So who's on the steering committee right now?
It is made up of the department heads.
Great.
From all the different departments, and then I would be the liaison as the trustees, and also Anthony.
I would say that the survey went not just to the village board, I sent it to the members of the planning board, members of the environmental advisory committee, anyone who would have some kind of DPW interest in DPW, their services they provide, tree maintenance, for example. Recycling and those types of things, so they can fill out the survey as well.
Excellent.
Great.
Good. Okay, so I guess the one thing that'll be coming to the forefront is developing the RFP for the architect. So we'll get that in the forefront.
Awesome. Thanks so much for doing that.
And thank you for
Absolutely.
your work on it, both of you.
It's very needed. I'm excited about this consultant and putting all this together. So you're welcome. That's all I have.
I'll say thanks when I see the final.
Absolutely. It's all about the results. You
Yeah.
got it.
And it'll be up to us to implement.
For sure.
But thank you, Sandra.
Absolutely.
Our next agenda item is an update on the police reform and reinvention collaborative that was ordered by the governor. As we've been working the last several weeks with the collaborative, which is made up of representatives of neighborhoods in the village, the business community, and other stakeholders. We had a public meeting last week for additional input. And there's one message that I've made consistently at the beginning of every collaborative meeting, and then usually again a couple of times during the meeting. As Sandra can attest, she has been a part of this collaborative from the beginning as a board representative. And that is that we are going to comply with the governor's directive that we have a plan and that we adopt before April 1st, and we get that in. The biggest component of that plan is that this collaborative is going to continue. We're not going to have a series of recommendations and we're going to say, okay, here, we're done in a short period of time, and then move on from there. I've talked to the chief about this extensively over the last several months, and we think that the best way to do this is to continue this collaborative past this, what we view as an artificial deadline of April 1st, and continue to do the work. And then as we identify things that, as the collaborative identifies things that can and should be implemented, we would go ahead and do them as we're going along, as opposed to waiting until some final version of this report is done. I will say that one of the biggest hurdles we've faced so far has been engaging folks who live downtown, especially Spanish speakers, in this process. There are a number of folks who were named to the collaborative, as you will recall, because you approved them. And it's been difficult to get the participation that we think we need. So one of the things that we're going to be doing as we move forward after the first is engagement in a different environment and different forum than in the collaborative sessions themselves. And that means that we'll continue the kinds of meetings that we've had over the last 8 or 10 months, and actually over the last couple of years, a meeting at Warner Library, meeting at St. Teresa's and other places in the neighborhood where it's more convenient or more comfortable for folks to come and participate. And I think that that is an absolute necessity for this process. So a couple of updates on what some of the things will be in a somewhat abbreviated plan that will be presented to you over the next couple of days for your consideration. Among them are some policy recommendations. Number one will be that the collaborative continue at least through the rest of this year. A number of recommendations have come from members of the collaborative and from the public who've commented throughout this process. One of them will be modifying policies of the police department that are consistent with procedural justice, somewhat to many of us a new term, something that the chief is very much in favor of as well, and one of the recommendations that both he has made and members of the collaborative, independent of the police department, have made. The continued cooperation, collaboration with other communities that the chief has already begun. One of the issues that's come up, for example, And that has been a big issue in larger environments in our own, in cities, saying so much gets dumped on the police department. Here, you're social workers, you're mental health professionals. You take on all these responsibilities for which people are not necessarily trained or not usually trained at all to take on those kind of responsibilities. In a small village like ours, in a small department like ours, we can't really have so many of those specialties. It's really, really difficult to fund those and also have the necessary number of people on the force. One of the things that the chief has been exploring with other communities is how do we collaborate with other communities who have the same needs that we do and could bring in some of those specialties that might be partially funded by each one of us in 8 or 10 different municipalities. So it's a way of bringing those kind of services in as we need them, and getting it done in a way that actually makes sense to all of us and something that we could support. So that's certainly one of them. Continuing training for the police officers is a big recommendation. So in things like implicit bias and de-escalation, additional work with domestic violence, which unfortunately is an issue in our village like it is in so many other places. And to enhance community policing, on the street policing procedures and policies. So those are some of the things that we need to do. An additional one would be, and this goes to some budget considerations for the board as well, as many of these do, and that's enhancing data collection. A collaborative like this works only when we get the right kinds of input, and there's a number of different things that fall into that category of input. There's the actual data, the stats, as the statistics, as I like to think of it, that actually come from our police department. How many arrests did we make last year and the year before? Who were the people that got arrested? What did they get arrested for? Had they been arrested before? Are they local? Are they not local? What's their gender? What's their ethnicity? So things like that, we can update our data gathering mechanism that we have in the police department, which is quite old, unfortunately. We can update that, and that's going to allow us to better analyze trends in the police department. It's going to give a tool to the chief and his top command folks as well to be able to identify things that they can't necessarily see now. It's almost more anecdotal than it is stats based. So that is a big piece that we think would help as well. That data collection also means more data collection from the public. And that is both as in the form of the survey that is currently circulating, and additional surveys that we would put out in the coming months, and data collection, meaning hearing from people directly about what their concerns are and regarding the police department or policies or their neighborhoods, and as they relate to the police department. And one of the other ones that I think is really important as well is fostering a better understanding in the community at large of what the police department actually does, and what the officers' responsibilities are under the leadership of Chief Buetti. I think if people have a greater understanding of what police officers are required to do and what their responsibilities are, there's going to be more understanding of what they can do to better participate in our community. So those pieces will be those items for the plan will be circulated in a more articulate version than what I've just laid out to all of you in the next couple of days. And I look forward to discussing them with you in more detail.
Ken, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to add on to that, if I could, real quick. I was reviewing some of the proposed recommendations, the rough draft of them. And, I want to commend Sandra and you and Anthony and all of the committee for all the hard work that you all did on it, because I know it's a difficult job, and Chief Boetti as well. Just going through it, it looks to me like some of the stuff is a little redundant and there's things that we do already. And I feel that they can definitely be improved upon, but there's a lot of stuff in here that we do already that maybe has slipped through the cracks, excuse me. And, we could bring to the forefront again, like particularly the SRO. I mean, I was on the committee for that a few years ago, and the SRO is supposed to be a big deal, doing classes in the school and bringing attention to the police department, to the youth. And haven't heard much about it, but also communication. A few of these things can be combined, it seems like. There's just a lot of stuff in here that I think that we could do, that we do already, that just needs to be improved upon.
There's a recommendation from the chief to continue the Bridge Builders Consortium, which I think goes to that same issue as well. Just so you know, for those folks who maybe are watching this work session and haven't been watching the collaborative meetings, which are, by the way, broadcast live. You can attend via Zoom, as you may be attending tonight, or you can access them on the village website and view them later, as you may be doing this work session later on. So there's an opportunity to see what the interaction is in those meetings, including last week's public meeting. So we've had a very broad range of recommendations for folks. Things like increased ESL opportunities for adults in the village. I think the schools do an excellent job of that already for younger folks, but that was a strong recommendation. We did have a recommendation that we I'll paraphrase it, but essentially look into abolishing the police department and reassigning those functions to other folks. So looking to, and it's a very idealistic proposal saying, hey, don't we all want to live in a world where there's no need for a police department? Well, of course we do. We don't want to live in a world where we need armies either. And unfortunately, we do live in such a world. And there is a strong need continued need for a police department. And so there was a proposal to put that funding elsewhere and to start with Sleepy Hollow as one of the places where that could happen. So as I said, a wide range, a lot of different kinds of proposals. We can take pieces out of almost all of those, I think, and look for ways to implement things. I think taking the funding away from the police department and putting it into other opportunities, there's a piece of that that the chief is pursuing. How do we get a domestic violence counselor on site when needed, which is right at the time that the police officers show up? Well, we don't need one 24/7, so it would be difficult to fund that, but it's a need. Unfortunately, it's a need in a number of communities, and we could participate in something where we could have that service for us. And there's some other things, mental health issues and other kinds of things where there's an opportunity for us to participate. And I think it goes to kind of the greater concept behind rather a proposal to take police funding and use it for something else. I think we can do some of those things in a small way here that actually makes sense for our village. As I have said repeatedly in our collaborative sessions, I think the biggest issue for us is having folks from downtown and especially Spanish speakers from downtown, participate more both in village government and in our public meetings, our public hearings, and all the way around. One of the things we've heard repeatedly is that there's a fear of government, a fear of police, not solely or only or just or even Sleepy Hollow police and Sleepy Hollow's government, but in general, a fear. And folks whose immigration status may be questionable are worried about what happens if they complain, and is somebody going to come after them? Is there going to be very real retaliation? And unfortunately, that is something that immigration folks coming in and destroying families in our village is something that we've seen in recent times. So it's very real. It's not a vague concept. It's something that people have seen happen. So we've got that to overcome. We have a lot of work in front of us to get people to feel comfortable enough that they are going to participate. One of the things that the chief has always said is we can't do our jobs adequately if people don't talk to us. They have to communicate with us so that we can better know what's going on. And that is far and away, I think, the biggest issue that we have in Sleepy Hollow. And one that's going to take some real serious work and real serious time to overcome.
Well, it's another reason why community policing is so important.
Mm-hmm. I think some of the things that we've done, to echo Denise, what you've been saying are really important to us. That our focus over the last several years, Glenn was a big part of this. Is the longest serving member of this board, a trustee member, was saying we're going to hire local wherever we can. That we think we're going to be better off if we hire police officers that are bilingual, that grew up in or live in Sleepy Hollow, because they already know the community and they know people in it. And the chief has done a really good job, and boards have done a good job of pushing for that policy and adhering to it whenever we can. And I think that's something that has been a benefit to the village and will continue to be in the years to come. And that's something that people don't necessarily see right away. So there are a number of things that I think we've done. I'm saying this because we all watch TV. We all see the horrendous things that happened over the last year that brought certain kind of violence that has been there for, certainly didn't start last year, but seen horrendous things that happen with police officers in other parts of the country. And people want to do something about that. They want to be able to say, well, we're working on this. And, when we look at our own village, we can look at it and say, well, let's, do what we can to be better at what we do. But at the same time, let's recognize that we didn't do that. Our police officers didn't do that. They didn't do that here. Let's not come into this with this idea that we are fixing that problem in Minnesota or in Atlanta or in Brooklyn here where we haven't had it. Can we be better at what we do? Of course. But let's not blame our folks for those kind of horrific things that we've seen in other parts of the country. Hopefully this collaborative will continue to do that and grow into something that will be better understanding all the way around in the village, and we'll be healthier and stronger for it.
I'd like to just make a mention too. As much as we haven't seen as many of the residents come in from downtown and speak, we have gotten a really good representation from Diana Aloha. She is a trusted representative for the community. And so I share that because you read the recommendations that are on that sheet, and they are they are the result of the work that's been going on behind the scenes for the people on the collaborative that have reached out to the communities to get that information in that has resulted into that recommendation that you're seeing. So I feel even though we didn't get as strong of a representation individually of the people on the collaborative, we have gotten their voice at the table. And what we are continuing to do with everybody's input to say, how do we make communities feel comfortable in going to their setting? That being one community that we've identified through Diana. So, and that was another thing that I had such an awareness when we talk about communities. It's not so much about the neighborhood; it's about the communities in which you live in, and they kind of cross over sometimes depending on work, personal relationships, and that too has an interesting dynamics that has been brought to the forefront. And then there's another thing, Denise, that you brought up, and I think it's a really finer point. There's those duplications are by design, because what we did is we put the recommendations in as they came in. So when you start to see the dupes, you start to recognize the significance of that. And when you look at the data collection behind it, it could have come from a very different source, but they kind of almost mirror the same thing. So then that's what will happen with the governor's order. It will start to get grouped together, a theme, and that's really where the chief comes into play. And I too had the same the same statements as you did. Like, there are so many things that we are doing, but that wasn't the part of the collaborative. It's not the beginning part where you say, what have we done? What do we do better? It's what the perception is of the residents, of what they feel. And then it's so interesting. I've just recently have spoken with the chief because, as you know, I've been involved with, the newsletters and how do we get our PR campaigns out. And I think we're at a point, once we get past this, to be able to sit down and say, let's put some of that good work that we've been doing all along down on paper and see what it looks like, and put that as a position and on the website. So I agree with you. I think it's not so much where we also have to improve, but what are the things that we do really well. So.
Right. And I think you're right. If the residents don't see it, of course they're not going to know about it. They're not going to know that we do it. So again, like I said, that's the stuff that we are doing is there, but may not be seen by everybody. And that's something we could definitely improve on to get everybody more involved with it.
Yeah. And I'm definitely a fan of that. And I'm campaigning to make that happen.
So I think we've made a lot of very good progress moving forward with a lot of decisions that have been made in terms of new hires and promotions and becoming more bilingual. We're all very proud of our police department, and in many respects, we're a role model for other communities. But I think we can do a better job in building trust. And that comes from creating relationships and really getting to know people every single day, and making it a point to ask about how things are going and what's going on in their world where they could be more helpful, et cetera, et cetera. That makes a huge difference. And it's not always easy to accomplish, but it's very, very possible if there are lots of different opportunities to interact between the public and the police department in little small ways that can become very, very meaningful. It's about being friendly. It's being interested. And all of a sudden, people who did not necessarily trust the police department for a variety of reasons, that begins to thaw. The chill goes away and it becomes a warmer atmosphere. And I think that's something that we can aspire to do even better than we have in the past.
Well said. Thank you. Any questions or any other comments about Police Reform and Reimagining Collaborative.
Mhm.
That's the official name, by the way. Okay, I did have something that I wanted to add to the agenda that I'd sent around to board members, and that was a contract to do a traffic study, and then it comes out of our long running efforts to do something on Route 9. So after many years, the DOT, New York State DOT, which controls Route 9, controls Broadway, finally went to one lane between the hospital and the Old Dutch Church, put in the turn lanes. That's been a huge improvement. We've been after them to look at what happens between the Old Dutch Church and 448, the intersection of Beekman and Route 9 and New Broadway, that as well. And we've also been after them to look at the island between Old Broadway and Route 9, or sometimes called the traffic island. And part of our plan has been to, why don't we extend the northern end of the island so that we at least square off that intersection. So you don't have this weird kind of space where Dell and Gordon come into Old Broadway, comes into Route 9, comes into Pearson. You know, I mean, we finally got DOT to put up a walk signal and set it up so that pedestrians aren't going to be killed trying to get across this street to the Old Dutch Church or the cemetery. But DOT is very slow at what they do. And the last time that we met with them, they came back and said, well, what kind of traffic studies have you done? And said, well, we've given you the traffic studies, 2 major ones that we did. And as well, before we can do anything and give you the approval to do anything, including something as simple as putting out cones on the road, temporary or bollards out on to sort of block off the northern end of the traffic island to sort of get a sense of how it would work there. They said, we need a traffic study. We have a group that said they could do that, take our existing studies, add some stuff to those. It's a relatively modest price to do that. The firm is a group called Hardesty and Hanover and Frederick Clark Associates. And they would be able to put a study together for us that would look at both ends of the traffic island. So also where Pecanico and HHV connect to Route 9 as well. The fee would be $11,500 or not to exceed. I would like to fund this. I'd like to get your approval to do that, in part to kind of call DOT's bluff. And it's like, oh, well, you guys didn't give us another traffic study. Okay, well, we are giving you another traffic study. It says, you know, here's the data. Can we at least start to move forward on this stuff? It's really exasperating. Unfortunately, I think we do need to do this, or we're not going to hear anything out of these folks. Not anything positive anyway. So I've sent that around to the board. I think it's pretty straightforward. If you take a look at it, I'm not sure if you had anybody's had an opportunity to do so as of this evening, but if you could please review it, I would love to get approval to move on that next week. And if anybody has any questions about it now, please raise them. And then of course we can talk over the coming days as well.
And you just said it's gonna.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna ask.
Trustee Gebler
Okay.
has the
Thanks.
floor.
Thank you. Zoom is so hard that way. I guess my question was, when was the last traffic study that we did? of this area. And have we done one before?
We did extensive studies with when General Motors and Roseland were looking at
Okay.
you know, the project, which was initially a larger project than it turned out to be, looking at all of the same things that DOT is raising now. Well, once Edge gets built out, you're going to have all this, you know, all this traffic. And it's like, well, yeah, that's exactly what those traffic studies looked at in great detail. So that's one of them. You can say, well, that's, you know, 12 years old or whatever. It's still the same, looking at the same issue. How many cars are going to come out and where are they going to go? What are the traffic patterns going to be? We also did one with the East Parcel, looking at what is part of our FEIS for that. So there's at least two, one really major one, another one that we've done. And from what we know, DOT has done their own. They haven't given us a copy of it. They have not been forthcoming when we've requested a copy of it. I suspect we're going to need some help from our state representatives to get a copy of their study, but they have not deigned to share that with us. So we know there's a significant amount of work that's looked at this. You know, their argument that, well, you're going to have all these cars coming out of Edge on Hudson, and if you go to one lane on, you know, on Route 9 in front of HHV, that's really going to back things up. And it's like, guys, those people are coming out of Edge are going to be on one lane roads the entire way before they get there. You know, that's not going to cause a bottleneck. It just, you know, what are your studies shown, you know, for how you restriped from the hospital on down? You know, I just don't think their arguments are particularly valid. And they haven't shown us anything that shows that they are. They've just tried to throw up roadblocks, I think.
And so
We did another
you or
study
Anthony
about
get a
fire-
sense.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Trustee Gebler?
Oh, sorry. Just to follow up, you and Anthony get a sense that this traffic study they'll hear us. Do you think that they'll actually do something if we give them this data?
I think it will give us more weight with our state representatives, because then we can
Okay.
say, okay, we did this one, we did this one, we did this one, you know, it wasn't enough. Like, what else could they possibly want? And somebody has got to go lean on these guys to give us a constructive approach.
We did one around 5 years ago, and that's, I think, the result of the redoing the pedestrian crosswalk mechanism. So,
Yeah, I seem to remember, I was going to say, I seem to remember when I first came on within like 5 years ago, we did a study that was pretty, you know, detailed. I remember
That's the
getting a
one.
presentation about it, actually. And I think,
Yeah.
Anthony, you and I probably brought it up to DOT with us.
we did, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think to the mayor's point is, if we don't do it, we know nothing's going to happen. If we do it, maybe nothing will happen, but maybe something will happen. So I think and it's time for an updated one, since it was 5 years ago from the last time we did it.
So
It's time to put another arrow in our quiver so we can move this thing forward.
my question was, will this study look at the studies that we've done in the past, the one that we had done, the one that was 12 years old, and then,
Yeah,
so Anthony, would you be able to provide them with that other study? Okay.
it's
Yep.
on the website. Okay, it's part of the state could get it from us like right now. Okay, that's part of the, I don't know, nonsense that we're going through with them.
By the way, if I'm not
you did a
mistaken,
study? Yes, we sent you a copy. If you lost it, you could, you know.
if I'm not mistaken, this is the company that did the traffic study for Open Door when they were doing their We're trying to get approval on Route 9. I'm pretty sure that's the same company. So
So
that's
that's
4
another
traffic
study they
studies.
could look at.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Lots of ammunition.
yeah. Sorry for the old school analogy about the quiver, but anyway, so please take a look at it. We need to apply some pressure. This is one way of helping to do that. Okay. Anything else for anybody?
Mr. Mayor, do you want to mention that the tentative budget is in?
The tentative budget is in. It was distributed to members of the board. It will be posted shortly, if it isn't already, on the village website. It is the mayor's budget, which is the official name for the draft budget. In round numbers, we're looking at a tax increase for home owners of 5%. It's a little under that, but rounded off, it's 5%. It's 9+ for non-homestead, meaning commercial properties. What will happen over the next several weeks, since we have to adopt a final budget by the end of April, is members of this board will be going over it and making recommendations for either additional things to go into the budget that aren't there, or more likely things that are in the budget that we might be able to do without in this coming year. So those are the starting numbers, and we will see where we end up in the coming weeks. The public will also have the opportunity to weigh in on this at every one of our regular board meetings coming up. There's always an opportunity to speak and to be able to communicate to us through our emails and otherwise. But look forward to that process getting underway. As I've said, it's among the most important things we can do, since it sets the course or village action and activity for the coming fiscal year, beginning in June. I just also, I wanted to note, this is Deputy Mayor Rosenblum's penultimate meeting. And we'll talk more about this at the next meeting, but it has been truly a pleasure. I wasn't going to say a joy, because then you'd know I was, no, because I know it hasn't been for you either. But it has been a pleasure to serve with you, and through some very, very interesting times. And you've contributed an enormous amount to the village over these years. And I think what will happen is, just like will happen for all the rest of us, nobody's going to remember our names in 10 or 15 years. But what matters is, it goes back to the thing I learned as a childhood: leave the place better than you found it. And you can absolutely say that, Glenn. It's definitely a better place than when you first came on the board. So thanks. You're
muted, Glenn.
You're muted. You're still muted.
I didn't want you guys to hear my dog barking. So I was about to say that it's been an honor and privilege for me to serve the village for this past 8 years, and to work with all of you, as well as the village staff and our consultants. I also want to thank all the residents who have supported the United Sleepy Hollow team, and given us the opportunity to hopefully make the village a better place for all of us. And I'll always have fond memories of our time here on the board, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished.
Well said. We will revisit this theme next week. Be there, please. Thanks again from all of us.
Same here.
All All right, folks, that concludes our agenda. So be safe and look forward to seeing you all next week. Thanks and have a pleasant evening.
Okay,
Good night.
Thanks,
Bye. Good night.
everybody. Have a good evening.